Let's discuss our political transfer window. For those of you that don't know, this has become a very popular thing in professional soccer. They open what's called a transfer window twice in the year, and that is the time when you're able to buy and sell players between clubs. In between those periods, you're not allowed to move. Well, perhaps we should start thinking of having a transfer window, because this one seems to be permanently open at the moment. So let's take a little bit of a look at what the political transfer market looks like at the moment, because it's been a very interesting market, and in actual fact may tell us more than what political analysts and pollsters even tell you, because here you're hearing it from the politicians themselves. Let's start off with the party that was in the most need of political talent, and they were big buyers on this political transfer market, and that was Umkhonto we-Sizwe. Umkhonto we-Sizwe came from just a little idea of this, KZN party to, getting overtaken by former President Jacob Zuma and doing very well in the 2024 general election, where they got nearly 15% of the vote. They were probably geared up for, less than half of that. So suddenly they were really short of talent. And boy, did they have to buy. So the easy place to go and start was with all those ex-politically connected state capturers, people like Brian Molefe, Siyabonga Gama, all these people that were looking for a job because they'd been fingered in state capture, so they were no way of earning money. And these guys are now all in parliament as part of Umkhonto we-Sizwe. But they also needed some political talent. They didn't need only the guys that were involved in state capture. So Jacob Zuma got some of his politically connected former ministers. Nathi Nhleko comes to mind, one or two others. So he got a fair number of people that, let's be fair, I think the ANC were quite happy to see the back of. But then, of course, that wasn't enough, because in true Jacob Zuma style, he had to get rid of some of the people that started Umkhonto we-Sizwe, which left him with a further shortage. And he went to the transfer market and bought back some of those people that the ANC had lost to the EFF. Mzwanele Manye, the former public prosecutor, John Slope, who got kicked got impeached as a judge. So you go out there and you get these people from the other parties and they join your party. Cool. He still needed some people that could actually do something. So who do they get? Bongani Baloyi. Bongani Baloyi, a man who's been on our show many times, had an interesting history. He was a very, very successful mayor of Midvaal up here in Gauteng. And he was a shining light and somebody who had a real future that looked like he had a big future in the Democratic Alliance. But he then joined Herman Mashaba at Action SA. And clearly the two of them didn't quite see eye to eye before Bongani went to try and start his own party, Chaluba, that did so poorly in the last election that he didn't get a seat. And in a real bolt from the blue, he joined Jacob Zuma. And now he's busy working his way up in that organization and being touted as a potential Secretary General. Why is he being spoken of as a potential Secretary General? Because the other guy who's got that job is one Floyd Shivambu, who was also bought in the transfer window from the EFF. And Floyd Shivambu is now persona non grata because he was silly enough to get into a spat with Jacob Zuma's daughter, and one doesn't survive those. So it looks like he's pretty soon going to be on the transfer market. Another one of their signings was Colleen Makubela, who was the person as a representative for Cope in the Johannesburg City Council, gave her a vote against the party guidelines to bring the ANC into power. Now, Cope, you may remember, was a party formed by a whole lot of people, including Colleen Makubela, that didn't want to be in a party run by Jacob Zuma. And then, surprise, surprise, she ends up at Umkhonto we-Sizwe. So that takes care of a big chunk of the purchases in this transfer market. We understand they went from naught to 15%. That's a lot of MPs that you need, and pretty soon, and a lot of people in the provincial legislatures. And coming soon in the local government election, they're going to need a lot of councillors. So people are busy flipping very quickly from the once mighty ANC in KZN, and they're joining Umkhonto weSizwe. Now, why are these people doing this? Is it for ideology or is it for money? Well, of course, they're all going to claim it's for ideology. Much like, that football player that gets bought by Manchester United will tell you how much he always loved Manchester United and probably never been there in his life. Couldn't think of anything worse. But you've got to say, you've got to pay the piper. You've got to tell people exactly what they want to hear. I love this city. I love Liverpool. I love Grimsby, wherever you go to play your football, because they're the people that employ you. So you go along and you tell everybody how you align with that thing. So I wouldn't go too heavy on the ideology side, okay? In most cases, it's a job. Now let's discuss that a little bit further. If you're a politician, what are your options? In most cases, you've studied a little bit, but this has been your job probably from your first job. You finished varsity, you're probably on the SRC at your university, politically aware, politically involved, and pretty soon got snapped up by a political party, or you joined them willingly. Always looking for smart young talent. But the years flick by, and suddenly you may be a graduate, but you've got no work experience outside of politics. So what jobs are available to you? You can be a politician, or, this isn't like many other countries where people had a job before politics. In most cases in South Africa, our politicians have not had a job before politics. So off they go, and they now need to find a job in politics. Or what? They could become a political analyst or consultant. Well, we've already got a couple of those, and there's not really a big flourishing market for that. I suppose if you're lucky and you've got name recognition, you could go into business, but that would be more on the tenderpreneur side. You're somebody, and we see them, our president's one of them. You cash in your political profile for a couple of, a decent percentage of a big company, and you become a billionaire. Great business model. The problem is that most of those have already been taken. And that is probably the reason why Cyril Ramaphosa has been arguing so hard to keep BE going, because that is another job potential for politicians. To go and to say, I'm going to join your company. I'm just going to sit in the corner there with 25% of your equity, and I'm going to make 3 phone calls a year, and hopefully that turns into business.
When it comes to getting around South Africa, Pace Car Rental makes it easy. Whether it's a quick run to the airport, a month-long rental for business, or a vehicle to help grow your hustle, Pace has the right wheels right when you need them. With a wide range of reliable cars, vans, and bakkies, flexible rental terms, and friendly service you can count on, South Africans trust Pace to keep them moving. Plus, use promo code SONA and get a special discount on your next rental, because every journey deserves a head start. Reliable, affordable, proudly local. Pace Car Rental.
But can they run a proper business? Well, I've managed to sit across from many politicians in this country, and I don't know if I'd be rushing to hire them. These are people that get further and further removed from reality. They don't really know what it takes to run a business. They think they do. They also think that it's okay to sort of operate with electricity for 16 hours of the day. These people aren't people that are rooted in reality. So to hire them in your business is probably a non-starter. So you're probably left with the political option. If you see your party slipping and you see another one rising, you get on board. Now, just recently, we've seen the Democratic Alliance lose quite a prominent and promising politician, young Liam Jacobs, who was in the DA and has left and joined Gayton McKenzie at the Patriotic Alliance. Now, Liam has got charisma, he's got talent, he's very young, and he sees a rising star that he can go along, get in early. It's a bit like buying a share. You buy early before the hype, and you hope that this share goes, to Pluto, and then you can make a lot of money. And the political equivalent is you get into a party quite early. You get to senior level, and then when the party does top out, they're getting rid of the guys that came in after you. Not you, but at that point you're part of the management committee, you stick around. So Liam Jacobs is going to be an asset to the Patriotic Alliance. And he's seen that he can, cash in his abilities as well as his color. He's colored, so he, that's the market that the Patriotic Alliance is going after. And so off he goes. So let's look at some of the other transfers that we've seen. Well, we've seen the DA do some minor acquisitions. In the Cape Town Council, they got Benele Majingo, who was from the ANC, and the EFF councillor Lungiswa and Chushu. Now, these are hardly high-profile, nationwide named people, politicians with big reputations. No, these are people at a local level that they can get. It helps the DA with its demographic issue, but that's minor. We haven't seen the DA get anybody on a major level, but we have seen them lose a lot of people. I mentioned Liam Jacobs, but let's not forget that they currently have 3 of their ex-members that run political parties. You have Patricia de Lille, who's on about her 5th party, and she now has her own shop called Good, and that's just her and ex-DA member Brett Heron. There's nothing to see here. That will die with them, and they'll just end up with 1 seat less every election, and they're down to their last seat. So, so you've got Patricia de Lille, ex-DA, you've got Herman Mashaba, ex-DA, who started Action SA, and Musi Maimane, who started Build One South Africa. So that's another option. If you get to the top of the poll, you start your own party, and you hope that people take you seriously. So, what we need to look at is the movement of people and what it's telling us. Well, what it's telling us is that nobody's joining the ANC. We haven't seen one person joining the ANC. And there's a good reason for that. For starters, the ANC is dramatically overstaffed. Remember, they lost 17% of the national vote. In other words, they went from 57 down to 40%. Similarly, if one looks at the 2021 local government election, which still applies today because most of those local government seats are still sitting where they sat in 2021 after those elections, they're going to lose about 10 to 12% of those council seats. And that means people out of jobs. So the ANC, far from being a buyer of talent, they're a seller of talent. The problem is their talent ain't so talented. What are going to be the saving graces for the ANC? Well, the saving grace is going to be that they are overstaffed, so they don't mind losing some people. And secondly, they've got some really old people that are hanging on, make me feel quite young. The Cyril Ramaphosa's, Bladen Zamandis, Gwen Ramakgopa. Geez, these people are deep into their 70s already. Angie Motshekga. I mean, come on. Time for them to go to pasture, which they probably all will after the 2027 elective conference. And it'll help them right-size by attrition. And remember, the ANC, lastly, has had a monopoly on the great big business market. In other words, sending your members to go to business. They get shareholding. They don't have to do any work. They get a few tenders. And that's their bundle. They can stay in pointy shoes for the rest of their lives. So that's the ANC. The DA has got quite a strong school of new talent. They get a lot of young people joining there, talented people, and often they are a little bit like one of those, we see it in sport a lot, one of those places that develops a lot of talent. They do develop a lot of talent that ends up everywhere. At the moment, they're almost completely staff Action SA, ex-DA members by and large, many in places like Rise Mzansi and, a few other places. So the DA now that they look like they're not really interested in growing, it doesn't look like they need more talent than what they can produce themselves. So it's all pretty neutral. Patriotic Alliance, they're definitely going to have to start buying talent. Question mark as to whether they were a serious political party until this last general election, where they did really well, and they found a market as the only party speaking to the coloured population. This was a sector of the population that the DA had wrapped up and chose to ignore it. So, there's a potential upside there of up to 10% in the Patriotic Alliance in the fullness of time. They're going to have to staff those places. They also had some people up at the top that hardly what you would call politicians. So you can see an opening for young South Africans to join the Patriotic Alliance. Initially going to be a lot of coloured members that will join them. But soon enough, I think Gayton McKenzie probably savvy enough to start spreading his wings and not just have everybody from one group. So the transfer market, if you ask me, is something to keep an eye on. It tells me a lot about politics. It should tell you a lot about politics. And it's just fun to see the movement of people and to understand that the market is probably more fluid now than it's ever been. The next couple of elections are going to see big moves. Right? There's a question as to whether MK either becomes a force to be reckoned with and grows, or it tanks. The ANC, do they recover, or do they go down to 30%? Does the DA start looking for growth, in which case they could grow, or if they continue on their role of stagnation, they're going to fall? That's not a maybe. These little parties, if one looks at places like RISE, Build One South Africa, Action SA, does one prevail and gobble up the other two? Or do they all grow, and it'll probably come at the expense, I'd imagine, of the DA and to a small degree of the ANC, and natural talent will fill that up. So, that's all from me. Keep an eye on the transfer window. It's always open. That's the difference between politics and sport. Sport, they close it during the season. In politics, it's always open, and if there's a position that becomes open, somebody's going to stick their hand up. So, stick your hand up to go and support Pace Car Rental. Rent a car there, get a discount using our code SONA, and subscribe to this channel. And this has been my opinion. We'll see you next week.